Hello everyone, I work for the Public Education and Outreach Office at the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. My colleagues and I will be discussing the principles of democracy in South Africa and the role and function of the WCPP. Democracy, that term, what does it mean? It is always bandied around. There are many definitions for it, but the one I prefer is the most common one. Democracy is the government by the people. The government by the people. It is a system of government wherein the public elects public representatives and politicians to run the country on their behalf. Once elected, the public representatives and politicians have a duty to the public to run the country efficiently and to ensure that they deliver the services as promised. On the other hand, the public have a duty to pay their taxes so that the government of the day can be able to deliver resources such as public housing, public schooling, public health, and public social grants.
In this section, I'll be discussing how government in South Africa is structured and also how it functions. In South Africa, government is constituted as the national, provincial, and the local sphere of government. This is provided for in our Constitution in Section 40. Section 41 of our Constitution provides that these spheres of government are distinctive, meaning that each sphere of government has its own area of operation. They are also interdependent, which means that there must be cooperation amongst the different spheres of government. They must also acknowledge each other's area of operation. They are also interrelated, which means that there must be cooperative governance amongst the three spheres of government. They must also work with each other to ensure that they deliver services to all people in South Africa. In fact, Section 41 of our Constitution sets out the principles of cooperative government in South Africa. Amongst other things, the three spheres of government are required to work with one another. They are required to foster friendly relations in their interaction with one another. They must also support one another, consult, and inform each other in areas of common interest. Now, let's have a look how this works in practice. At the national level in our country, you have the national sphere of government. There is a president who exercises executive authority in our country, who is assisted by other members of the cabinet. Together, they form what we call the national executive. National government is also responsible for matters that are applicable to the entire country. Example of this would be, for instance, the area of South African National Defence Force, South African Police Services, and the economic policies of the country. At the provincial level, the executive authority is vested in the Premier. The Premier is also supported in this role by the members of the Executive Council or provincial ministers in terms of the Western Cape. Again, at the provincial level, government is responsible of carrying out policies of the government of the day and also implementing the laws as passed by the provincial parliament. Provincial government are responsible for areas such as primary and secondary school education, agriculture in our province, as well as provincial roads. As you can see how this is designed in our constitution, is that all the different spheres of government in our country must support one another and ensure the delivery of services to everyone. Of course, then the third sphere of government that we have is the sphere of local government. Local government in South Africa comprises of 284 municipalities that you find across the country. Municipalities are the government that is closest to the people. They operate at the local level. Municipalities are responsible for delivering basic services in our country. For example, local government is responsible for water, refuse collection, and municipal roads. Local government, like the other spheres of government, they do have departments that implement the policies and carrying out laws of the government of the day. But what is important though is the municipal laws and regulations must still be within the framework of the national and provincial legislation. In this way, the unity of the state is maintained. However, provincial government and national government are required to support local government to ensure that it fulfills its constitutional duties. In this section, I'll be discussing the three arms of government. The three arms of government are provided for in the Constitution in chapters 3, 4, and 8. The three arms of government are as follows: the legislative arm, the executive arm, and the judiciary. Now let's delve into this a little bit, what it means. The legislative arm of government comprises of all the 9 provincial legislatures that you find in South Africa, together with the national parliament. The legislative arm of government is responsible for passing of laws, amending existing laws, also repealing laws that are no longer required. Then we also have the executive arm of government, which is responsible for carrying out these laws and implement it across the 3 spheres of government in South Africa. Then the third arm of government is the judiciary, and the judiciary performs a very important function in our country of interpreting laws and apply them in specific situations. The way this is set out in our Constitution provide for the principle of separation of powers. Principle of separation of powers is very important for South African democracy. It is important for the following reasons, because it ensures that there is no concentration of power in one arm. It also ensures that there is no interference by one arm on the other arm's area of operation. The judiciary performs this important function by having an oversight role over the executive as well as the legislative arm of government. That is why in our country, if you've got a problem with the actions that have been taken by government, you can test this in our court. There are also a number of legislation that have been passed in our country to ensure that government of the day does not act outside of its powers. In this section, I'll be discussing the functions and roles of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. One of the core responsibilities of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is to pass laws for the province, to amend existing laws in the province, and also to repeal laws that are no longer required. Section 104 of the Constitution provides that the Provincial Parliament may pass laws in any of the matters that are listed in Schedule 4 and 5 of our Constitution. Now, you may ask yourself, how are these laws passed? A draft law, which we call a bill in Parliament, is often introduced by a minister that's heading the various departments in our province. It may also be introduced by a member of the Provincial Parliament. It may also be introduced by a standing committee. Before a draft law becomes an act of Parliament, it goes through a series of stages, and those stages, amongst other things, include consultation with the public. Now, this is very important in our democracy because the views of the people of the Western Cape must inform the laws that are passed at the end of the day. The other function of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is oversight. As an independent institution from government, the Western Cape Provincial Parliament also has the oversight responsibility over the Western Cape Provincial Government. Another function of the Provincial Parliament is to conduct oversight over the Western Cape Government. In our Parliament, oversight takes place in different forms. For example, elected members of Parliament, they get the opportunity to ask questions to the members of the executive, and these will be the provincial ministers that are responsible for the different departments in our province. More of the detailed function of oversight is performed by our standing committees. Standing committees in our Parliament, they have a power to summon anyone to appear before it, to give evidence, to provide documents to the standing committee. Another important element of our work as a provincial parliament is to facilitate public involvement in our processes. Now, this is set out in the Constitution in Section 118. In this way, people of the Western Cape do get the opportunity to raise their views on matters that are before Parliament. This is achieved through the lawmaking process where Provincial Parliament will visit various areas in our province to consult the members of the public on draft laws that are before the Parliament. The purpose of this is to gather the views and opinions of the citizens of our province on matters before our Parliament to ensure that the laws that are passed by the Provincial Parliament are for the people of our province.
Today, I would like to talk about the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996. There are so many definitions to what a constitution is, but we can say that the Constitution is a book of legal rules. These legal rules are also known as laws. All of the laws that are written in the Constitution are carried out by the executive arm of government. The legislative arm of government is again responsible for writing these laws that we find in the Constitution. The Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996 is South Africa's 5th Constitution. We had previous constitutions, but those constitutions did not protect fundamental human rights, and those rights were also not protected and granted on an equal basis to the citizens. The current constitution that we are operating according to entails the Bill of Rights, which we find in Chapter 2. The Bill of Rights is known as the cornerstone of our democracy. Now, what does it mean if we speak about the Bill of Rights as the cornerstone of our democracy? It simply means that without the Bill of Rights, we will not have an effective and efficient democratic government. Some other interesting facts about the Constitution is that the Constitution is the fundamental law or the supreme law of the land. This means that no person is above the Constitution. All of our actions as citizens and all of government's decisions and actions must be in line with the Constitution. Another interesting fact is that the Western Cape has its own provincial constitution, and these provincial laws are in line with the national constitution.
Today we will be discussing state institutions in support of constitutional democracy. The Constitution provides for constitutional democracy and sets out all of the rights of the citizens of South Africa. In order to give substance to these rights, the Constitution also requires that there be independent institutions established to promote and protect these rights and strengthen constitutional democracy. Chapter 9 of the Constitution states that state institutions in support of constitutional democracy be provided for. These are, and in no particular order, the Public Protector, South African Human Rights Commission, the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Communities, the South African Gender Commission, the Auditor General, the Electoral Commission, and the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. The task of these commissions is to promote and protect the rights within the Bill of Rights which fall under their area of authority. These institutions are independent, impartial, and subject only to the Constitution. They are to exercise their power and perform their functions without fear, favor, or bias. The National Assembly is responsible for recommending commissioners to the commissions. The President is ultimately the deciding factor on who is appointed to these positions. The appointment process for each of these commissioners is transparent and open to the public, with each stage of the appointment process publicized via distribution to the national broadcaster. The relevant commissioners can be consulted when respective rights have been violated. These commissioners have extensive authority, which includes, in some instances, the right to search premises, to attach documentation, as well as to subpoena people to appear before them. The commissioners are responsible and required to report to the National Assembly on an annual basis on their activities and the achievement of their goals.
The budget process is a very thorough process that consists of 4 phases. But before we get to those 4 phases, we must ask ourselves, why is a budget important? On the one hand, we do have a provincial legislative arm, which is known as Parliament, and on the other hand, we have an executive arm, which is known as the Premier of the province, together with the ministers and also the government departments. Now, these government departments, such as the Department of Health, the Department of Education, the Department of Human Settlements, they need money in order to deliver public services to you and I as citizens. In terms of how the money is allocated to the different government departments to spend it, it is important that we understand these 4 phases of the budget process. Firstly, we have the phase of drafting. Secondly, we have the phase of legislation. Thirdly, we have the phase of implementation. And fourthly, or lastly, we do have the phase of auditing. During the drafting phase, the Finance Ministry issues guidelines to the government departments in terms of drawing up their budgets. These budgets are then submitted for approval. During the legislative phase, it means that all of the government departments' budgets are tabled in Parliament. Parliamentary committees can consider, amend, or reject these budgets. Then we do get the implementation phase. During this phase, it means that the government departments, also known as the spending departments, they spend the money in order to deliver public services to you and I. During the implementation phase, each government department receives a portion of the budget in order to make sure that us as citizens have service delivery timeously. Lastly, we do get the auditing phase, whereby the Auditor General and the Audit Committee assess the performance of these government departments or spending departments, and then they write reports about it, which Parliament will be reviewing. I would like to speak about public involvement in the budget process. This means, how do you and I get involved in the budget process? Well, we can listen to the budget vote presentations, or we can attend those presentations. We can also make sure that we attend the annual reports on service delivery, which takes place every year from the 30th of September onwards. We can also involve ourselves by making sure we attend debates and sittings in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament in Cape Town, number 7 Wales Street.
Annual reports are the key reporting documents for government departments. They report against performance targets and budgets outlined in the strategic plans. Annual reports contain information on service delivery, the financial statements, as well as the audit report. Now, while the strategic plan and budget of a department are seen as forward-looking documents outlining the government's intentions for the upcoming year, annual reports are seen as backward-looking documents reporting on performance in the previous financial year. Why are we speaking about annual reports, and where does the Provincial Parliament fit in? Earlier on, you would have heard about the oversight function of the Provincial Parliament. In order to give substance to this oversight function, the provincial government is responsible for providing full and regular reports of matters under its authority to the provincial parliament. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts performs a key function within the annual reports process. The standing committees of the provincial parliament provide essential support in this entire process. What is the annual reports process? Step 1. Before the 30th of September every single year, the government departments will table their annual reports in the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Step 2. The Speaker will then refer the annual reports to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, as well as to the relevant standing committee of the government department or entity. Step 3. The Standing Committee will then deliberate on the annual reports and interrogate the department on any queries that they might have on the content within the annual reports. Step 4. The Public Education and Outreach section will conduct educational programs with stakeholders to ensure that they are able to understand the content of the annual reports. Step 5. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts and the relevant Standing Committee meet with the government department to compile a report based on the recommendations from the earlier interrogations. Step 6. Once this report has been drafted, it is adopted by the Standing Committee. The final step is where this report is then referred back to the House for budget votes.
Petitions are some of the ways in which the citizens of our province can bring matters that affect them to the attention of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. This is a right that the citizens have, which is provided for in Section 115D of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament has adopted a procedure to process and consider petitions. In terms of this procedure, a petition can be on any matter that is within the ambit of the province. So in other words, it must be any matter that the Western Cape Provincial Parliament has responsibility for. The example of these matters are agriculture, primary school and secondary school education. It is important to note that before a citizen can lodge a petition to the Provincial Parliament, must have exhausted all the available avenues before approaching the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. In other words, if it is a matter that falls within the ambit of local government, a citizen is required to have approached the municipalities, all the relevant authorities, in a bid to solve the matter. In terms of our procedure, you will also be required to produce evidence that you have done everything you could in your power to resolve the matter. In other words, a petition must be used as a means of last resort. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament will not consider a matter that is still subject to legal proceedings before our courts, any matter that is still under investigation of any of the Chapter 9 institutions, any matter that is still subject to a public inquiry. Once a citizen has fulfilled all these obligations, the petition may be addressed to the Secretary of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament via registered mail. You may also deliver the petition at our buildings. We are at number 7 Wales Street in Cape Town. On receipt of a petition by the designated petitions officer, the officer will then examine all the documents received to ensure that they comply with our requirements as outlined in our petitions procedure. For example, the petition can be in any of the official languages of our province. It can be in Afrikaans, English, or in isiXhosa. Once the petitions officer has been satisfied himself that the petition does meet the preliminary requirements, it will then do an investigation to ensure that the matter falls under the ambit of our province. Once the petition has met all the set requirements, it will be referred to the Office of the Speaker, who refers the petition to the Petitions Committee. A Petitions Committee, in consideration of the matter, may call witnesses to give evidence, may also require both parties that are involved in the petition to attend Petitions Committee meetings. And the purpose of this meeting is to find a sustainable solution to the matter. It is important to note that a Petitions Committee does not operate like a court of law. Therefore, it doesn't issue out binding decisions to any of the parties, but it's a way of bringing the conflicting parties in the matter together with the purpose of finding a lasting solution.
The Constitution provides for public involvement in the lawmaking, oversight, and various other processes of the Provincial Parliament. Our constitutional democracy allows not only for citizens to elect their public representatives, but to also have a voice in matters concerning them. Section 115 of the Western Cape Constitution provides for citizens to bring evidence or information before the provincial legislature. One of the ways in which you can bring such evidence is submissions. Submissions are written or verbal comments on proposed new laws within the provincial legislature. These can be made by a person in their individual capacity or by a group or association. These are on proposed new laws or policy which is before the provincial legislature. While there are no set formats for how submissions are to be made, in order to assist members of the relevant standing committee to understand your submissions, it is important that a submission be concise and clear. Submissions can be written in one of the 3 official languages of the Western Cape. These are isiXhosa, Afrikaans, and English. What do we include in a submission? You need to be clear on who you are as the individual person making a submission, and if you are acting on behalf of a group or association, be clear as to which capacity you are acting in on behalf of that group or association. Identify your main issue, provide the background to your main issue, clearly link your issue to the legislation at hand, provide a proposal on the way forward, as well as outlining your expected outcome within the submissions process. How do we submit submissions to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament? Submissions may be directed to the Secretary of the Provincial Parliament or to the Chairperson of the relevant standing committee. The contact details for these individuals are available on our website. Alternatively, you may make your submission by hand delivery to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament at 7 Wales Street in Cape Town.